Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Decoding your COA. Spencer Tielkemeier is the Vice President of Sales North America for Yakima Chief Hops. He spent 9 years as a production brewer in Austin, Texas, specializing in hop forward and continental lager styles. Since joining YCH, Spencer has been a key part of their brewing innovations team, developing new products, honing best practices for product usage, and providing tailored customer support in challenging production application scenarios. Spencer believes the best beer pairing is made where hops meet difficult. He lives in Chattanooga, Tennessee with his wife and 3 children, and he will share his email address with you later on. I will try and spell that. Please welcome Spencer.
Thanks, Coach. I'm going to do my best not to use a mic. If anybody's having trouble hearing me, I'll try to stay still back there, but I find it's a little easier to do it this way. Yeah, I'm Spencer Tielkemeier. Thanks for having me. It's a tremendous pleasure to be here. I go to a lot of state guild functions, and I have to say this is one of the best, if not the best, every year. New York State really does an excellent job, so thank you for hosting us here. So I'm a former brewer. I'm just going to give you a real quick caveat right at the beginning that I'm not a chemist, I'm a brewer. The whole intention of this presentation is not necessarily to make you, infinitely familiar with every single chemical compound in hops, but rather to help you understand as a brewer, what do I need to care about in a certificate of analysis and why does it matter to me? So I'll try to, most of what I'm intending to do here is talk about this as a former brewer, as someone like, why should I care, right? So it's called Decoding Your C of A. A gentleman in the front here got the Christmas story reference in the back, but essentially C of A's are variably useful depending on how much you know about them and how much you pay attention to them. But my intention is to help you sort of sift through the information that you're getting from whichever hop vendor you're purchasing from and tease out the things that are ultimately going to be most useful to a brewer. We'll kick it off though with a quick, just to get everybody engaged, I'm gonna do a quick poll. So if you don't mind, if you have a device, scanning the QR code real quick. It's a bit of a knowledge check to see what the room experience level with C of A looks like. It'll be on the next slide. So the question is, what does HSI stand for? You should be able to, if I did it correctly, we should be able to see live results. Okay, hop storage index out to an early lead. Hop synthesis index, got some voters. Hop sexiness index. Sorry to find out the rankings.
Bring us hops back.
That's right. All right, we got kind of a good mix here, but it looks like hop storage index got the pretty commanding lead. That is the correct answer. Hop storage index, or HSI does stand for hop storage index. We will talk about that in detail here in a minute. But it is a very common industry term. I'll also just give a caveat to say, I'm going to show you a lot of stuff today that's from Yakima Chief, C of A's. Those are the ones that I have access to, so that's what I'm going to show you. But these are concepts that apply to hop spot really from anybody, and you should be able to use these concepts to look at any C of A and make sure that you're understanding what you're purchasing. So one more for you real quick. Myrcene is, this one's a little harder. If you've been to any survivables presentations in the past, you might be able to dig into this one, but monoterpene, sesquiterpene. Soluble ester got it up. So, okay, we did well here. It is a monoterpene. Myrcene is a component of hop oil. We'll talk about that in a minute here, and it's a large component of hops. But one of the things that we'll talk about in just a second is, though it's quite large, it's a big percentage of hop oil. It's probably not the biggest contributor to hop aroma in finished beer, and not necessarily something that's going to be a huge driver of C of A quality analysis. So we'll talk about that more in just a minute, but anyway, thanks for playing here. We'll have one at the end to kind of sum things up, but without further ado, we'll get into C of A's. And to do this, I'm actually going to give you kind of a historical walk through time of what the evolution of C of A's looks like. And it should help us kind of understand a little bit, why did we arrive at the moment that we have today? Why do you have the things on your C of A that you do, and what's the purpose of, or what's the genesis of how they got there? So we're gonna go way back here to the Stone Age. I actually had to get one of our very long tenured employees to dig this up for me. This is a hand-signed C of A from back in the day. This is back when Yakima Chief was Yakima Chief Inc. And you think we've got good hops now, but I can only imagine the untapped ratings that this guy got for some 2002 clusters that he was using. But so you'll see, there's not a lot here, right? It's an Excel document. We know the lot number, the variety, the product type, which is T90. We know alpha acids by UV, and we know beta acids, and then there's some pretty rudimentary heavy metals testing at the bottom. This is a C of A born of the person that was buying it, right? This is the C of A that basically gives what big beer was demanding of hops at the time. You'll notice, there's nothing on here at all about oil whatsoever. There's no total oil, there's no breakout, there's no components. This is what was being demanded of the hop industry at the time, and so that's what they give, right? But there's not a ton here for a brewer of today. There's hardly anything, actually. Really, the only thing that would be really useful to the average craft brewer is alpha acid. That's obviously something that we still report on, but not a ton here to really sink your teeth into if you're trying to evaluate what am I buying, what do I need to know about this hop as I'm about to use it in my beer. So fast forward to 2010 or so, the interface didn't look exactly like this in 2010, but this is roughly speaking what we have now. And this is gonna be pretty well matched by, I would say, most C of A's that you'll see in the market. So to point out a few things here, so we have quite a bit more information at this point. We have the acid assay. Actually, I'll zoom that a little bit on the next slide. So acids over here, this one, in this case, this lot of talus, 2022 talus, was measured by alpha, by HPLC, and by VBAC. That's not that common. Those are 3 different analysis methods for alpha acid, but UV is the most common, so typically that's what you're going to see, and that's just what it sounds like. It's alpha acid. You've got beta, and then you've got a breakout of total oil and sort of some constituent oils, and I say some because there are a lot, but this is some constituent oils. You've got the hydrocarbon group like myrcene and beta-pinene. You've got a couple monoterpene alcohols, linalool and drenol. So they're there, there's some usefulness in that, but it's relatively limited. And then we've got a couple other things. We've got HSI, we've got some of the alpha acid analogs like cohumulone and colupulone. The UV methods, or the scientific methods that we're using in the farm, that's actually a relatively recent addition, but this lot was grown by Peralt Farms. And so there's a few things to take away here. In this total oil group, you're going to see what this is an analysis that was sort of born of, I would say, merchant need more than it was out of brewer need. Essentially, this analysis gives a merchant a sense that the Cascade bale that they just received from a grower is indeed Cascade. It's kind of a fingerprint of, like, gives us a good sense that what we're receiving is what it's supposed to be. That being said, there's not a tremendous amount of useful brewer information in this total oil breakout. Geraniol and linalool being the 2 exceptions. Those are monoterpene alcohols. They do make a very big impact in finished beer. They're quite important to hop aroma. The rest, though, are the ones that end in "ene." Our lab manager has a phrase that if it ends in "ene," it will not make the scene, right? So these are not very soluble compounds. They don't, by and large, make it into beer. If you analyze a finished beer, typically myrcene is not something that's found in great abundance. There are a few rare exceptions. Haze does sometimes adhere to myrcene, but in most cases, myrcene and those types of things are not really big components of modern IPA aroma. There are some oxidized fractions that do contribute to lager beer aroma in some cases, but by and large, what we're talking about here is those compounds are not that useful. So, and you're probably saying to yourself, why are you telling me about all this stuff that's not useful to me? We'll get to the point where this is going to evolve to be something that's much more like a brewer-centric tool, right? And I'm hoping that, throughout the course of this evolution, you see how it's evolving from being something that's very merchant-centric to something that's very brewer-centric over time. I do want to talk about something in specific real quick, though, and that's HSI. So the HSI of this lot is 0.222. This is a T90 pellet lot. 0.222 is very good. HSI, I feel like, is one of those things that's been around for a very long time. Any merchant is going to be generally running HSIs. It's a standardized, accepted method by the NYSBC, so everybody's running the same test to run this. It's not a proprietary process or anything. But I don't think that the average brewer has like a very good grasp on this, or if it is, it's kind of like in bits and pieces. HSI is a really useful tool for a lot of reasons. One of them is that everybody uses it, right? So it makes this apples to apples comparing between lots and between different types of hops very useful. To illustrate this concept a little bit, I'm going to pick on Centennial, and if you've ever seen me present before, you know that I bag on Centennial quite a bit, but it's just so easy to pick on. Centennial stores like crap. It's just a really tough hop for a lot of reasons. It doesn't yield very well, it stores very poorly, it's just the way its genetics are, right? It's just not meant to store very well. And what that means is alpha acid, and in some cases aroma diminishes very quickly in Centennial if it's not into pellet format and handled really, really well. So it's a beautiful variety. It wouldn't have stuck around this long if it wasn't as gorgeous as it is, but it does have challenges. So this looks kind of unimpressive. I'd like to do a little storytelling with it though. So what this is box plot averages of our HSI distributions of Centennial bale lots. And I say bale lots in specific because that means this is what we received from farms. So we as a merchant have not touched this product yet. This is purely what we got, what Mother Nature gave us, and what the farm was able to handle. So we received bales, and this is the box plot average of what that looks like. So just to give you some reference, between 0.25 and 0.3 is considered very good in our industry. Between 0.3 and 0.35 is considered like, average, not so good, and above 0.35 is not good. So this measure, what HSI is essentially, in rough terms, it's essentially a measure of the amount of abuse a hop has had in its lifetime up to that point. Some people use the analogy, how bruised is the banana, right? So the higher the HSI number, the more abuse, theoretically, that hop has seen in its lifetime thus far. It's also an indication of its tendency to further degrade from that point on. A hop that's been abused is more likely to further degrade from that point on. It's generally speaking a feature of how crushed up have the lupulin glands gotten, how beat up is the hop itself, how much has it seen things like heat and oxygen. The two main enemies of hops are going to be heat and oxygen. So what this is meant to show is we can only control so much. What Mother Nature, you see there's quite a range of variance here between something like 0.25 to getting up in the 0.28 range of bale lots that we receive. There's a lot of things that affect bale HSI. The grower, how gentle they are in their handling when they pick it and when they bale it is a part of it. But some of it is just Mother Nature. Last year, you'll see Centennial HSIs coming in were much higher than they were in 2021. Some of that is a feature of just what we had that year, weather, stress events, those kinds of things. And most of that is built into the hop's genetics, and it's not something we can control. What we can control is how good of a job we do of maintaining the quality once you receive it. So the quicker that we get it into pellet, the quicker that we get it into mylar, the more liquid nitrogen, the more gentle the handling as we get it into T90 or cryo or whatever its finished goods format's going to be, the lower that HSI will stay, and the better the storage capability of that hop into the future. So pay particular attention as I flip to the next slide to 2019 and 2022. So this is the same variety, but this is T90 pellets instead of bale lots. So in this case, we've handled it, right? We've taken the bales and we've put it into pellet format. And what you'll see between 2019, I'll flip back and forth a little bit here. So that's bale lots, that's T90 pellet lots. The scale does change a bit here, so I want you to note that. It goes from being a 0.25 scale to 0.3. But what you'll see is, in 2019, we didn't do a great job, quite frankly. We clearly let some Centennial go longer in bale than it should have. You have the average Centennial in 2019 was something like 0.32, and the range was quite wide. We even have some outliers that are up in the 0.4 range. not great. That's quite frankly not what we would like to see going out in the market. To give you some sense of why this looks like it does, though, COVID actually gave us a few silver linings. It was a pisser, don't get me wrong, but it gave us a few silver linings. One of them was instantly everybody got long on hops, right? The pandemic hits and instantly everybody's long on hops, and we did not have people clamoring to pull their hops in September, October like we would in a traditional year. Historically, we have people that we're going to September, they're like, I'm out of Citra. How fast can you get my pellets done, right? And so in those cases, we're having to jockey the schedule in all kinds of weird ways to get certain lots pelleted so that we can ship it out to these various parts of the world and so on and so forth. In COVID, none of that was a stressor, right? So we were able to plan a production schedule that was as ideal state as it could possibly be. And what that meant was we were able to put Centennial at the very front of the schedule. And we blasted through all of our Centennial by mid-October. And so what you see here is, since 2019 and the onset of the pandemic, we've taken Centennial HSIs down and tightened the range so much, and that's purely a feature of we just got it done earlier and we just got it done better. And the difference in quality between a 0.28 Centennial, which is basically the average right here, and a 0.32 Centennial is the difference between something that you'd be happy to use for 3 years versus something you'd be happy to use for 1 year. And it sounds like a small range, right? 0.4 is not a huge range, but it's a tremendous differentiator in terms of quality, particularly for a variety like this that doesn't store very well. So that's all this is meant to say. When all of us are out at harvest every year, if you've ever been there, you've likely experienced this. I hope that all of you have a chance to come out at some point. It's a tremendous experience. But brewers spend a lot of time out at harvest, like really anguishing about like, did such and such grower have a good year? Did Yakima Chief have a good year? Did Peralt Farms have a good year? They don't spend nearly enough time asking who pelleted it. Did they handle it well? Did they do a good job? Did they pellet it in the right timeline? Did they use a lot of liquid nitrogen in processing? Did they keep the HSIs low? Because the best bale of hops, the most beautiful bale of hops in the world can be ruined by poor handling, instantaneously versus something that's 3 years old that was handled really, really gently and is in Mylar and has been stored cold its whole life. So I guess to illustrate that a little further, temperature is huge. This is a study by Geraldine Timbo that basically is just showing two different UV methods, but the basic difference between these lines up here and these lines up here are storage parameters, basically storage temperature. You'll see that the alpha acid degradation of the green and orange lines is almost nil, and in a matter of 75 days, the hops that were stored at 35 Celsius essentially lost, 80% of their alpha acid. And then looking at this another way, the HSI of these hops all started out at right around 0.25, and you'll notice that when stored hot, the HSI climbed tremendously within about 75 days, whereas the ones that were stored cold follow a curve, which is basically what we see on almost everything, is once it goes into pellet, you see a slight dip and then a slight rise, and then it essentially stabilizes. If it's held cold and it's held in Mylar, Mylar is a remarkable product. Hops don't degrade that fast when they're in Mylar and when they're stored cold. So the takeaway here is use HSI. It matters, in my opinion, more than crop year. I think brewers are becoming more and more savvy, especially in a market where hops are relatively abundant, that they need not be scared of previous crop year hops. But I can't offer that up enough. That when you're evaluating what you're about to purchase, use HSI as a differentiator. If something was handled really gently and it's 3 years old, you shouldn't feel scared of utilizing it if it was processed really well and it was a good quality material that was going in the beginning. So yeah, HSI is a powerful tool. So the future. I think this is like knockoff Doc and knockoff Marty McFly. I looked this up online, and as I was reviewing the slides today, I was like, I think I got cheated here. But anyway, so what does the future look like, right? So we've talked about how This evolved from being sort of like the thing that big brewers demanded of hop merchants, and then the thing that merchants used to be able to basically evaluate the varietal purity of what they're receiving. So how do we turn this into something, like ultimately our job is to help you, make your beer better, make your lives easier, that kind of thing. How do we evolve this to something that's going to be a brewer tool rather than just something that's ultimately serving a merchant or a large brewer? Let me see if I can toggle here, sorry. Oh, there we go. All right, I'm not a software developer, and I'm going to have to act like one for a moment. But, so what does the future look like? The future, it's our intention to make the future something where the C of A is something that is very, very brewer-centric, specifically intended to help you make better decisions about what you're purchasing, what your recipe design looks like, why are you putting a given lot of hops in your beer, where should you use it, those kinds of things. So as we look toward the future, this is like a build out of a future state lot lookup tool. You'll enter your lot number, and it'll look more like this. This is a lot more information than what you've had in the past, right? So to be specific, we'll still have things that we've always had, right? Alpha acid is a very useful measure. We'll still have beta, those kinds of things. But, and we'll still have the same suite of oil components that we've had in the past over here on the right, but we'll start to have stuff like survivable compounds. So I'm not going to dive deeply into that right now. If you'd like to see, we have plenty of archive presentations on survivables if you'd like to know more about that. But basically, this is our estimation of the group of compounds that are likely most important to finished beer production, right? Likely the group of compounds in hops that are most likely to stick around and be in finished beer aroma. And therefore, something that we believe is really worth paying attention to. So you'll notice there's some familiar ones on there. I know it's kind of hard to read, but there's, monoterpene alcohols like linalool and geraniol. We did talk about that. Some soluble esters like isoamyl isobutyrate, and one polyfunctional thiol, which is 3-mercaptohexanol. So you'll be able to see these kinds of things, which are ultimately what I would be using if I was looking at a given lot of hops and thinking about, okay, I'm comparing between two lots. Which one is more suitable for this whirlpool application that I'm looking for? I'm looking for something that's likely high in linalool and geraniol because those are very heat durable, and those are going to be things that I want to do. In the current environment, it's not as easy to make those comparisons, but in the future it will be. And then sensory information. So we often say that in quality evaluation, there's the sort of qualitative component, which is what is it like, what does it smell like, and then there's the quantitative component, which is how much is in there, right? This or this doesn't give the full picture, but when you pair them together, they should give you a very comprehensive look at what a hop is, right? So this is the quantitative side. How much aroma products are in there? This tells you the how much. It doesn't tell you what they smell like. So there could be a lot, but it could be a lot of not that great things. The sensory is what's going to tell you in raw hop evaluation, what does that hop smell like? And so we use all of the major categories, citrus, pine, berry, those kinds of things. But that evaluation is intended to give you sort of the qualitative look at what does that raw hop aroma smell like. In the future, the ability to compare farms or compare lots and overlay those together. Like for example, this is two lots overlaid against one another. Will allow you to compare between lots. Ultimately, what this is intended to do is give you the most possible information when you're thinking about, like I said, what am I buying? What's it intended for? Where is its intent? Where is its best use in beer? And make this a brewer-centric tool. So let me toggle back here real quick. Sorry about that. So yeah, so sensory, just to recap there, is a professional assessment of raw hop aromas. It's not a finished beer aroma analysis, but it's an assessment of what those raw hops themselves smell like. it describes the qualities in the raw hop, but it's not ideal for describing quantity in beer, right? So it's important to understand that distinction. And if it does describe what the hops smell like, it will not necessarily describe what the quantity of aroma translating to beer is. Survivables are probably better for that. But it is useful in comparing multiple lots for sure. And one of several useful ways of evaluating hop quality. I've got one more poll question for you here at the end, but the intention here is to, in summary, I guess, I hope that you'll see that the evolution of C of A is something that is really born of what you need. Ultimately, it doesn't help us if a C of A is mysterious and sort of not useful for you. We want you to have as much information as you can possibly have, because it'll help you make better decisions, better beer, and that helps us, our growers. But use this, to your advantage. You check these things as you're buying hops. Make educated decisions. Ask questions. I know that I really enjoy it. All of our staff really enjoy it when we get good questions about these kinds of things, because it's engaging and we know all these farms. We love all of them, right? So to get to talk to you about like this farm and why it's special and what's unique about it, that's the best part of the job. So use these kinds of things to your advantage. Use HSI. And and make it a tool that leverages value in your brewery. So yeah, what do you find most exciting about the future of C of A's? Radar charts, lot comparison, survivables, or too much jargon, just get me a beer? Pretty good spread. Looks like multiple lots and survivables are taking the lead. Well, I'm glad to hear that, because I do feel like I say, my heart is still always in the brewing space. I still tend to think like a brewer. It's my first language, and that's what I would be most excited about as well. There's never been a time in brewing history where there was more useful information available to you as a brewer to make good decisions about what you're putting in beer. And that goes well beyond just Yakima Chief. I think that's across the industry. So it's a good time to be a brewer, and you should have abundant information and control. So that's it. I'd love to have any questions if you have them. Thank you so much for hosting us here. It's really a pleasure to be with you. Yes, sir.
When you post the HSI on the COA, you showed the chart of HSI at several different points in the pellet, or in the process. Is it typically like the lowest point that you post at which it's pelleted?
That's a great question. So most people don't have bale lot numbers, but if you had a bale lot, you'd be able to put it on a lot lookup tool and see the HSI for the bale lot. That's bales, that's unhandled product, right? And then the HSI that you see for any pellet lot that you put in is going to be HSI at time of pelleting. So we'll take a sample just post-pelleting, we'll run HSI, and that's basically a snapshot in time of what is the HSI right after the product was pelleted. That's, in my opinion, a lot more useful, because that's the finished goods that you're going to be using. So that's like I say, the HSI of that moment in time, and it's pretty indicative. Like I say, a low HSI is a pretty good indicator, even if something is 3 years old. If it had that really high quality snapshot in time, it's a good indicator that it probably degraded very little from there, because it does tend to be sort of an algorithmic scale of how quickly it degrades from that point on. So, yes?
I'm going to follow that up with, on the current lot analysis lookup, is that a snapshot of alpha acid once in time, or is that follow degradation as years go by is that like is that reflective of actual time, or is that just a snapshot?
Same thing there. That's going to be a snapshot in time of right when it was pelleted. If we rerun something for some reason, we would post the most current. But in most cases, unless there's a specific request or a specific reason to do so, what you're going to see is the alpha that was right after pelleting. And that's going to be UV in most cases, so that's a good question. Yes, sir?
I kind of use HSI to like quantify if I should use the hops or not. If I have 2-year-old hops and I look it up, 0.29, does that matter?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, like stuff that's already in your brewery?
Yeah. Okay, how do I actually use this number other than 2s are good, 3s are
I guess an example would be if I'm shopping for hops right now. So I would say it's probably more of an advantage on the purchasing side than it is something that's already in your brewery. Once it's in your brewery, I would say your nose is your best evaluator. Typically speaking, if it smells good, it smells like what you expect, that's what would be my indicator of whether to put it in beer or not. I would use HSI, for example, like if I'm like, I need some Centennial for seasonal that I'm working on, right? I would use HSI as an indicator of like, oh, there's a pretty good deal on some 21s, right? Like it's out there. So what I'd be looking for is, does it have a good HSI? And if so, I'm gonna feel pretty confident about what a two-year-old pellets, right? So I would say that's probably how I would more use it, is on the purchasing side and just making good decisions. There's a lot of good hops out there that from 1, 2, 3 years old, and that's one of the rigors I would put it through as I was making a purchasing decision. That's a good question. Yes,
Are
sir.
other companies doing that in their process as well for like just other hop yards and stuff like that, so that you know?
Yeah, you should. HSI is a really common industry standard, and pretty much any C of A that you get should have HSI on it. That's very common industry practice. Any other questions? Don't you? No, E.
Outside of HSI and some of the survivable stuff, any other kind of key takeaways or, kind of decoding that, anything else that, we might be looking at beyond those?
That's a good question. It depends how deep you want to go, right? Like farms are posted on there now, right? And things like that. And like, as people go along, if they begin using things that are, from a particular farm and they really like it, they begin to start to get attached to different regions. People start really loving Oregon hops and stuff like that. So I think we used to not post farm at all. We do now, and if you click on it now, you can actually see the map of the farm where it's at and everything like that. I would say, like, if I were a brewer that has never been to the Valley before but wants to sort of start dialing that in, I would just put in the lot and just something that I really like, I would start to get a sense of where it came from and potentially start thinking, if it's Oregon Centennial and that's just like a thing that I've really been enjoying, I would probably try to start seeking out Oregon Centennial more purposely rather than sort of by accident, right? Not in particular, I would say, and I would encourage you to ask any other hop vendor here if they have any different answer for that. But for me, I'm wondering about what's going to make it into finished beer. As we continue to do that research, that list of particular compounds may expand as if we see that there's just something we've been missing. There certainly could be. Hop science is a pretty nascent industry with a relatively few amount of people doing it, and so as much as it seems like a big thing. So I know that there's a number of other smart people in the Valley that don't work for us that are researching a few different particular compounds. So I dig into farm. Like I say, I'm biased towards that just because I work in the industry, but like it's so special, those individual farms. It just seems like a lot number when you're using it, but those farms they're very different from one another, and they all have their individual character and stuff like that. And so the more that you know about what you like and where it comes from, I think the better attached you'll be to the roots of your product. So, yeah.
What's the best hop?
Yeah, that's great. We ask people that in interviews, actually. There's no right answer, but there is a wrong answer. No, I love Simcoe. I mean, I know that sounds like, okay, you sell Simcoe, but it stores well, it picks well, it grows well, it does everything well in beer. I just love a classic West Coast Simcoe IPA. I love really peachy Simcoe. Like, it can be a lot of different things, but when it's like super, stone fruity, peachy, that's about as good as it gets for me. A super lovely lot of Cascade on the table, though, is like, there's not much better than that. Centennial, when it's really good and it's on the table, there's almost nothing that shows off better on the selection table than Centennial. It is, as much as I pick on it, it's a gorgeous hop.
So I was going to ask why you hate Centennial so much. I've been carrying the banner for Centennial for about 3 years.
It's a wonderful hop. It's just very challenging on the grower merchant side. The economics of growing Centennial are really poor. To put it in perspective, Mosaic probably yields something like, it's like a 14 bale hop, which is like, so 2,800 pounds an acre. Centennial this year yielded something like 900 pounds an acre. So it's just and this was a bad year, but still, even in a good year, you're talking maybe like 1,200 pounds an acre. So add that to the fact that it also doesn't store well, and it diminishes so quickly. It's just a challenging hop. Its genetics are not very modern, and like so many of the more modern hops have so much more disease resistance and yield and quality, all these qualities bred into them, whereas Centennial was bred in the 70s, And so I love it. I hate picking on it so much because I actually love that hop, but it can be such a dog sometimes.
Yeah,
It's
like you said, like the best homes I've ever smelled in person are usually Centennial.
Yeah.
They just burst right out. So
It's beautiful on the table, it really is, but that's before it's been handled, so, yeah. If you smell an old bag of Centennial that was poorly pelleted, it smells like sawdust, so, but anyway, so I don't hate it, I love the pick on it, but, anyway, Joe?
Yeah, one of the things that we look at, but always have qualms about looking at is total oil. So I'd love to talk a little bit more about total oil. One of the things that we do is just multiply the little and geraniol fraction times the total oil and try to get like geraniol points.
Yeah.
That kind of a way of looking at it.
Yes, I'll flip back to this real quick. That's a great question. So one thing you'll notice is that these are now, this is in ppm rather than a percent weight. So it's a really great question. So total oil is like, you do get like brewers that just are like, no, I won't use that. That's like, that total oil is too low or whatever. It's 1.1, that's unacceptable for Citra. It's a challenging proposition though, because total oil is just all it is a volume measure. And it's a volume measure of like thousands of different things that are all wrapped up in that one number. So it is a measure of quality. I would definitely say it's like not the measure because you're correct. Like it could be a lot that's higher in total oil, but if these numbers are lower, right? If the percentage weights are lower in this, it's not necessarily going to net more aroma. So that being said, if you see a Citra lot that's like 0.3 oil, you should be worried about that. Like that's too low. What I would say is if it's in an acceptable range for that variety, the varietal averages for most varieties are pretty easily commonly found. I can send it to you if you need it. If it's within range, I would sort of ignore total oil at that point and start to pay more attention to some of the more qualitative features of the hop, right? The aroma and then maybe survivables and stuff like that. Because people definitely can get too caught up in that. It's a measure, not the measure. It does not necessarily translate to more aroma, but it's something that should be noted. So, does that make sense? Yeah. The ppm in the future should help because that sort of agnosticizes the conversation about what's in it. So.
And we won't have to do that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Great question. Any others out there? Great questions. We'll be at the booth if you'd like to talk more. Thank you so much. Really, really appreciate it.
Thank you, Spencer.